Good morning, everybody, and welcome to AusCERT2022 Day 2. My name is Valdemar Jacobson from Business Aspect, and I'm your chair for this session. Just remember, questions, use the conference app to pose questions, and if there's time at the end, we'll actually pose them to the speaker at that point. For this session, we've got Deepak Naik from Qualis talking about SECOPS best practices for thwarting software supply chain attacks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deepak Naik from Qualis. I manage the platform security engineering and operations at Qualis. I'm very excited to be in front of you speaking about a subject which is of a lot of interest to us today and very relevant, supplier chain attacks and risks, and how Qualis manages these risks. I see it's Friday, people are trickling in now, so let me start my session. A couple of days back, I was at Canberra at the Tech in Gov conference, and I saw similar concerns from the federal customers and the suppliers alike, talking about how do they trust software suppliers, and is there an ecosystem wherein they can kind of validate the third parties and choose third parties. So one of the, let me start off by, okay, this is an introduction about me. And so when I was doing my research for this subject, I came across this childhood memory of mine wherein we go to a library or a bookstore and we have a dilemma in terms of which is the first book to pick. And I draw analogies to what the developer community also faces today, wherein the libraries have got replaced by the plethora of open source projects, libraries, and tools that they have. And like choosing the right book is very key to learning. Choosing the right tool and component is very essential to the success of the project and the longevity of the project. So let me take to your perspective of the exponential growth and adoption of third-party software. So I'm going to discuss about two aspects. One is a third-party software, which includes open source software. So the terms will be interchangeable. So the adoption has expanded and exponentially grown to an extent wherein 100% of the Fortune 500 companies today use some sort of third-party software in their ecosystem. You would rarely find a Fortune 500 company using software built by their own teams. So 100% of them use third-party softwares, and 99%, 419 numbers, use open source for their internal development. These include popular frameworks like LAMP and Mean, which they use for their internal developments. Out of these, so a generic example going beyond the Fortune 500 companies is 35% of all enterprise softwares today have some form of open source, to the extent that when we actually dig deep and do evaluation of these softwares, enterprise softwares, we find 75 to 80% of the source code is open source in the enterprise applications that we buy today. So in our research, which covered the applications which have come out in the last 2 to 3 years, what we have observed is in every 1,000 lines of codes, it's hardly 200 or 300 which come from the software vendor. Practically everything comes as an inclusion from the upstream projects or the library inclusions. Why is there such an exponential growth for third-party softwares? So we have seen large corporations like Microsoft, IBM, Google coming out and collaborating for open source projects, contributing to open source projects, making a lot of their projects open source now. This has brought in a lot of trust in the ecosystem, wherein people are conditioned to kind of choose these projects for their internal initiatives. Now we see with this, one of the major advantages is when people leverage on these third-party components and trusted third-party components, this reusability leads to them shortening their development cycles from months and quarters to days and weeks. Another important aspect that we have seen is the reduction in license and software costs. We have seen when we have interacted with our customers, one of the key decisions for them to use third-party components and open source components is the license cost and the development cost. What they have been kind of forthright in accepting that at times software contributes or IT contributes to nearly 40% of their overall operating expenditure, and any savings on this operating expenditure at times impacts their profitability of their company and sustenance of their company. Finally, it's not just about reusability or the cost. In a lot of niche areas like data science, cybersecurity, open source has the edge and is having innovative capabilities which are being leveraged by in today's competitive environment. You need to be innovative and you need to have a differentiator. So that also is pushing the adoption of open source exponentially. In spite of all of these advantages, now we also carry a lot of these use of third-party softwares and open source softwares are introducing a lot of risks into your ecosystem, which you cannot prevent, but you need to manage well. So I start off by choosing the most important risk emanating from software supply chain. It's the software supply chain attack. This is not a new concept. Software supply chain attacks have been happening in the past too. Of late, we have seen the trends growing to absurd numbers, wherein we see the reason for this interest, wherein we see a one-to-many relationship. We see one entity providing software to thousands of customers and becoming a single point of failure in this entire ecosystem. So just for brevity's sake, let me reconfirm, because there's a lot of confusion at times. Some of the recent incidents have also been clubbed as software supply chain attacks, but a supply chain attack is when a cyber threat actor is infiltrating into your supplier's network. He's introducing malware into his build ecosystem, wherein the softwares which are being built for the customers, DLLs, libraries, and in fact, at times there are just a couple of lines of codes which are written into your source code, which ensures that there are backdoors which can be opened subsequently from the deployed environments. So these vulnerabilities can be introduced from the outset, wherein the software being developed, or subsequently when the patches or the updates are going in. Because a lot of times, so this impacts your existing customers as well as the new customers or potential customers. So that's exactly happened in our case too, wherein we were evaluating SolarWinds. We chose this example because we have gone through and lived this experience, and we would like to share that experience with you. We were also evaluating SolarWinds at this stage, and we had a similar experience of then going through the process of investigation and understanding this entire supply chain attack, wherein there is a nation threat actor which was involved in infiltrating SolarWinds build ecosystem. They were able to inject a malicious DLL. In fact, they were able to download the DLL, access their source code, re-engineer their source code, and add lines of code, which ensures that a CNC connections can be subsequently opened from any deployed environment, and you can take carry forward the subsequent stages of exploit. So we've all seen the impact on the downstream impact on the customers, wherein it eventually led to data exfiltration. So one aspect as a practitioner, cybersecurity practitioner, I strongly believe is we cybersecurity professionals do a very poor job of doing impact assessment of cybersecurity incidents. We are happy when a cybersecurity incident is happening at our peers or at our contemporaries, but when it's not the same when we are at the receiving end. We quote these numbers, okay, as and these numbers help us kind of project the impact, the business value at risk to our management. So one of the things that we have seen for the SolarWinds impact is the direct impact on SolarWinds, wherein they spent close to $12 million in conducting the cybersecurity investigation and forensics. But this doesn't project the true picture. SolarWinds had thousands of customers, including potential customers like Qualis, who are evaluating their softwares. Each of these customers would have spent on an average at least 300 or 400K at a minimum to hire a third-party investigator to do an investigation. And if you multiply that, that's a simple math. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, which has been spent on this one single incident. Kaseya also is a similar incident wherein we had adversary infiltrate Kaseya's build ecosystem and inject malware, which then got downstreamed from one to many. There is a domino effect here wherein adversaries are today attacking the weakest link in this ecosystem. They are not using the front door. A front door of a fortified asset, like a banking application, is very difficult to break in. So they are choosing the path of least resistance, which is the back door into these ecosystems, which are typically suppliers. And Kaseya, SolarWinds, and these suppliers are actually offering that or are becoming means. Obviously, the cybersecurity postures have subsequently changed, but these suppliers are being identified. Larger the base, the customer base, larger the attack surface for them. And then you become the choice of that target. Along with this, so is SolarWinds Kaseya a one-off case, or are there similar incidents happening across the globe? This is a 2021 FBI report that it's available on the FBI portal, which we referred to. This talks about all the officially reported cyber crimes, which includes supply chain attacks. So we have the top 5 countries here: US, UK, Australia, India, Canada. So it also impacts, we are a target. Australia is also a target for these cyber attacks, which include software supply chain. So how has the industry responded, and how have the regulators responded to this spurt in software supply chain attacks? Industry, since open source doesn't have any common forum to kind of mandate the security and the quality of these softwares, industry has come up with, OASP has come up with the recommendation and standards. SafeCode has come up with the recommendations and standards. You have OpenSSF. There are some other forums wherein you can validate the quality and security of these softwares, incorporate that into your assessment mechanisms, and then include them into your development lifecycle. We've also seen over the last 2 years, especially during this pandemic era, governments wake up and upgrade and enhance their regulations around open source. Just give me a minute. The lights are too bright. Yeah. So in the US, this has got mandated now as a US presidential decree, wherein there is a mandate to implement NIST cybersecurity framework, assessment framework across all suppliers in the federal ecosystem. In fact, in US FedRAMP, there is a marketplace for suppliers who can be chosen to be empaneled and used in the federal ecosystem. At the same time, we have seen different maturity levels across regions, where there are other regions like UK and Australia wherein recommendations and guidelines have been enhanced as of now. And we see a trend wherein these recommendations and guidelines will eventually be mandated. In fact, I'm hearing about a critical infrastructure cybersecurity law which is getting passed in the Australian Parliament, which will mandate these adoption of these baselines across critical infrastructure in this region. So how does, we've seen how the industry has responded, we've seen how governments are responding to this risk. How does Qualis, being a cybersecurity company, the expectation of cybersecurity posture of Qualis is right up there from our customers. We constantly get into calls with our customers who have these concerns about, is Qualis a trusted software supplier? And we keep on responding to these queries. And we have evolved our cybersecurity posture to the extent wherein now we are able to share that with the community, with the customers. I'm trying to simplify this as I started off my discussion with third-party software and open source software. We are trying to keep the same theme wherein we start off the very critical aspect of our approach is identifying the spread. If you do not have any visibility to your ecosystem, you would not be able to understand the risks and manage them. What we have seen over the last 2 years is an exponential growth and hybridization of your environment from on-prem to cloud, from cloud to SaaS. So in fact, federal entities are also the adoption of cloud amongst the federal entities because of the supply chain issues in terms of scaling up, adding infrastructure, have compelled a lot of federal entities also to adopt cloud in their day-to-day software use. So what this has led to is an exponential increase in terms of your IT landscape. Your entire IT landscape is today not visible to us. So how do we bring visibility to the IT landscape? The complex IT landscape is we use our own tech stack for cybersecurity asset landscape, because asset management in today's context is not a one-time activity wherein you get all your assets together and that's about it. It needs to be a living process which gets updated continuously to give you the near real-time posture of your landscape, which we get from the cybersecurity asset management platform that Qualis has. So the approach, Qualis also is a software builder. So I call ourselves as OSM, not OEM. OEM is original equipment manufacturer, OSM, original software manufacturer. So we also build softwares. We also build third-party, we also consume third-party utilities, open source utilities to build our softwares. At the same time, we also leverage a lot of these platforms, open source platforms, data science platforms on the infrastructure layer. So we acquire technologies too, but the basic difference between these two is in the area of software build, we are writing codes. In the area of infrastructure, we are deploying these open source platforms. So we start off obviously with the approach of once we have unified and we understand the visibility, now that visibility gives us the stakeholders that need to be engaged with and interacted with to improve the security posture. The stakeholders are different teams. It is your development community. It is your IT operations team, the different administrators who are deploying this infrastructure. And it is also the procurement teams who are procuring these softwares for your various teams. At times, IT operations or engineering is not involved in software purchases. Your business team, your CEO just wants a note-taking app. He would just ask someone in the procurement team to buy it, and that is inside your organization. So security is not the responsibility. In traditional model, security is the responsibility of the security team. They will act as a gatekeeper with toll gates across the ecosystem. In Qualis, security is the responsibility of every engineer or administrator or procurement who owns the process, the product, the code. Now, this partnership ensures that the level of awareness which an engineer or a developer has about his own product is very high. We are also ensuring that we are giving all of this information in the platform of choice to the developers, to the administrators. A simple example would be of this partnership would be the developers are today working on Jira on the epics given to them for the feature enhancements for the new developments. They are working also on Jira bugs for resolving the Jira tickets coming out of the production applications. At the same time, if you're able to push your vulnerabilities also in Jira and give a consolidated view on this platform of choice, it becomes a lot more efficient for the developer to kind of include that in their subsequent phases. This also leads to a very good product and version management, wherein you can negotiate security capabilities in every subsequent versions, and you would realize that over a period or 3 or 4 versions of your software version lifecycle, you are able to improve the software cybersecurity posture of the software to a great extent. We have been successfully able to do that over 2 or 3 releases, and we advise the same to our customers and our community. So along with this, this partnership with the development community, we are also ensuring that rather than taking up a lot of things just before go live or towards the end, we are ensuring that we are baking in a lot of these elements by design in the base components which are chosen by the developers. So it could be controlling the repos which they are using, or it could be controlling the images which are published to them in terms of for use in their dev and build. We are also incorporating strong security baselines by adopting OAuth standards like Application Security Verification Standard. These standards have different maturity levels. You can assess your maturity level and then look at a journey which takes you from a maturity level of 1 to a maturity level of 3. Similarly, we have a very critical aspect in the software supply chain is composition analysis, a software composition analysis. We use multiple tools, including open source for our software composition analysis. In open source, we use, I think all of us are aware of dependency track. We are extensively using that this particular module. In fact, we have contributed to this module too. And we are using the OASP SCVS software component verification standard in our platforms, and we are at a level 3 for component verification. So, and this has happened over a period of time, and as we have gone through the pain of that journey, we are able to help our customers expedite this and give some of the insights that we have from our journey. Finally, repos which are used are very essential. You need to be controlling these repos and what goes into these repositories. We see a lot of a culture of blind build, wherein the developers have free hand to build anything with dynamic inclusions from the internet. What this leads to is an uncontrolled spread in terms of components, because dependencies are direct and dependencies are transitive. So you would never be able to control the spread of dependencies if you do not control the repositories that you are exposing. This will be a one-time effort wherein you will have to list down the repositories which are required for your current builds and repositories which are required from an engineering point of view. So I'll cover that in the subsequent slides. So I was talking about the secure build approach, wherein we are looking at different assessments. So we started off at the design phase by listing out the standards that we need to meet, specifying the specifications which have to be met in the software. We move on to software. So we are doing different assessments which include code review of our code, but very importantly, composition review. So the composition review comes from of all the engineering components or the engineering repositories which have been whitelisted by us. So we have control on the upstream downloads which happen to this repository. Only the trusted publishers are included in this repository. And these repositories are tested, and eventually these are the ones which do not have vulnerabilities, or the ones wherein we have only low findings are the ones which are subsequently pushed to the secure production repository and used to do the clean builds in the ecosystem. Finally, so this covers the area of wherein we were looking at how we build our softwares. And now we move on to how we engage our third parties. There's another important aspects, because every entity that we talk to or every customer that we talk to doesn't build softwares. A lot of these organizations consume software, they buy softwares. So it is very essential for them to understand how they can evaluate third parties, how they can manage the third party risk, how they can put differentiators to their third parties. So we start off by, again, there is a partnership with the procurement team, which is typically a non-technical team, and you need to make them understand the aspects that they need to look at when they are shortlisting vendors into your ecosystem. It could be as simple as looking at a PCI DSS certification for a partner involved in the card ecosystem. It could be for US, we look at whether the, if we are looking at a vendor to participate in our US business, we are looking at whether they are FedRAM empaneled. So these checks will ensure that a lot of pain which happens subsequently. We've seen a lot of times the developers or the IT folks have cut a very good deal with these vendors in terms of procurement of these softwares towards quarter ends, year ends, month ends, and we come in at the last minute and kind of put a hold to that particular procurement or that deal. This can be avoided, this pain can be avoided if in case we have these specifications given right at start, so that they are choosing or shortlisting the right solution providers to include in their solutioning. With this shortlisting, and there are multiple resources available. We mentioned about the local regulations around these, which also translate to checklists. We have also seen good process and checklists coming from Google and other entities, which we have kind of researched and used it in our processes. There is another aspect of looking at the cybersecurity posture of these suppliers. So you can use platforms like BitSight, Security Scorecard to look at the actual security posture of this, of these suppliers, which extends beyond the surface and gives you a true picture of in case there is a cybersecurity incident which is happening or which has happened in the past with that particular provider. With this, you also, because the suppliers that you will be interacting with are not at the same scale as what you would be operating with thousands of employees. There would be practically 30 or a few hundreds of employees. So you need to mentor them and ensure them this goes into their processes and they are able to adopt this journey, wherein they are also taken through different maturity levels so that they can come to a maturity level which supports your customer commitments. Because in different, we see this happening across regions, wherein if we are leveraging for lack of option in a certain region, a certain partner, subsequently we have identified these partners not to be compliant with the regulations in that particular region. Moving on to aspect of contingency planning, like we see that in the SolarWinds incident. Contingency planning and including your partners in business continuity is very critical, because you need to communicate to your customers of these incidents and ensure that they also are geared up to respond to these incidents. They are able to do their own incident investigation and forensics around there, so they can downstream that assurance to their suppliers and their customers. Finally, we can use a lot of third-party assessments. We have seen a lot of third-party validations happening across different regions. Unfortunately, there is not a common consensus of validation of how do we validate third-party, but at times certifications like ISO, SOC, and now the federal certifications and the federal marketplace is helping out in doing the shortlisting, wherein you can look at the level of cyber maturity which this organization is at. The best approach, we saw a lot of different aspects, but the best approach which has kind of got validated in our own experience of SolarWinds is the prevention strategy and the prevention approach that we have. In case of SolarWinds, we had segregated and implemented zero trust network across various environments: production, development, test, DR. This helped us in controlling the impact of the SolarWinds exploit from the evaluation environment. There was no exfiltration, and the restrictions that we had placed on the evaluation environment ensured that it is contained within the evaluation environment, and we were not impacted at all. So zero trust is a very simple philosophy. It can be implemented very easily by segregating your networks and ensuring that there are controls, access controls between these networks, and role-based access controls are there to ensure that a person on the production environment doesn't have any access on the engineering environment. We have a different take at privileged identity protection. What we see is privileged identity protection is usually looked at from an administrator's point of view. We are not looking at our developers as privileged identities because they are thousands in numbers. But we want to change the way people are looking at developers. We consider developers to be privileged identities, and we are looking at protecting, implementing protections which are typically done for privilege access management for developers too, so that they are not able to introduce any risk in the software development life cycle. So the codes are being treated like the customer data that you have and that you protect with your life. So we want them to protect their codes also on the same lines. We have also introduced code signing. So we want to shift left absolutely, wherein we want to shift to the terminal of the developer, and we are ensuring that the developers are signing their codes. So what is the advantage of a developer signing the code? We see a lot of code signing happening at the later stages, wherein you are signing your packages which are going out to your customers through a mutual code signing certificates from a public CA. But a developer signing his code ensures that in all the subsequent stages, these can be validated by peer reviews, by other mechanisms in terms of whether these lines of codes have been added by the developer. So it also helps in doing a root cause analysis if in case there has been any infection or because as I said, lines of codes are few for these backdoors. You can just write 3 lines of code and ensure that in a deployed environment, these will open a backdoor to the CNC from the wherever it's implemented. So code signing is very important. This will ensure that there is trust from the beginning. Okay. And finally, integrity validation of all the downloads which are happening to your repositories. What we have seen is a lot of engineering shops are using repos as only stores or cache for these particular projects or components. So they have GBs and TBs of downloads which are just stored in a file system which can be included by all the development team. We need to incorporate strong controls so that every new build can ensure that it is taking the latest version. It will not include the legacy version. So these controls will ensure that there is nothing which gets subsequently added to your supply chain. So let me summarize this. I've kept it short because it's a Friday, and each of these subjects, be it open source or third party, needs a lot of discussion and deliberation. I am available in our booth, so you can catch up with me, and we can actually share more insights, and we can share the research that we have done, point you to resources which will be really helpful in your journey. But let me summarize the key initiatives. One of the key aspects for these transformation is you need to own it because security, remediation, and mitigation is something which the engineering community is not very keen on. They feel it hinders the innovative capabilities. So every vulnerability remediation doesn't add any value to the development which they have done from their point of view, and that only adds more time. And they are not very keen on engaging with the security community. So there is always a DevSec disconnect, which I see. So we need to own the transformation and partner with the development community for them to understand the process and drive a lot of self-service. These assessments should not be driven by the security team. The assessments should be transferred. In fact, you would be interacting with a lot of non-technical teams like the procurement team and the finance team, wherein you need to create a very simple checklist for them, which they can adopt right at the start to kind of, drop vendors who are not satisfying the criteria that you have set. Subsequently, you have to shift your approach. So generally, everyone is fortifying their production ecosystem, the production pods. They are not looking at the desktops and laptops which the engineers use. There is, in fact, a lot of freedom given in the desktops and laptops, wherein free internet access, they can download anything because that is what they need to create innovation. But we need to also treat them like production servers. So the security focus has to shift to the terminals which the developers are using, the IDs which the developers are using, because these are the backdoors to the source code infections. At the same time, we also need to integrate and automate as much as possible. Like I was talking about software composition analysis. We should be going for multiple tools. We see that there is a fair amount of false positive also in some of these tools. So you can use multiple tools to triage, and improve the accuracy of the results, so that your developer community is able to utilize their time in a much better way. Finally, when we are deploying, like in our case, we deploy all new softwares in a segregated environment, which ensures that there is no risk coming from that innovation or that evaluation to your production environment. That is very key. That also helps you do identify if in case there is any malicious software with over a period of time, because of the CNCs which are going out, you need to do constant monitoring. This will help you identify, even though there is a component which meets your business needs but is malicious, you will be able to identify and weed it out. Finally, coming to the last point, we need to prioritize the vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are not going to be zero. Okay, that's an ideal world. We do vulnerability management very well, and we understand that on a weekly basis there are hundreds of vulnerabilities which are added. So vulnerabilities are never going to be zero. You need to identify and prioritize the vulnerabilities which are going to have a larger impact to business. You also need to understand what is your business. Security professionals don't do a very good job of understanding the business value at risk. So what is the business value at risk? And that should define, and if you are able to translate the business value at risk to the developer, to the management, prioritization will be with a piece of cake in terms of they understanding the loss to business, loss to reputation in terms of going ahead and doing that particular project. We have a lot of, Qualis supports a lot of community initiatives. We are all aware of SSL Labs, which is used. So I was just trying to bring that up, and we also partner with our customers in their security initiatives. We can also catch up subsequently in terms of what are the other things that we are doing, which are work in progress and which we cannot kind of talk about on these slides. Thank you very much, and I leave the forum open for questions.
So, first of all, thank you, Deepak, on behalf of the conference. Thank you very much for your presentation. And in terms of questions, it seems I'm the only one that's been asking any. So you've started to talk about one of the questions that I've had wonderful challenges around, which is how do you actually protect the developers working in the corporate SOE, the corporate desktop environment, where if they're working there versus running their IDEs in a virtual machine or on a remote system that's heavily locked down, they still need that agency, that ability to actually self-support, maintain their own individual tools and capabilities. How do you maintain that least privilege, protect your code base against DLP, data loss prevention, or have data loss prevention for your code base, and but still give them the ability to actually do their job in a way that they feel they need to be able to perform it?
Completely understand. See, I come from a banking background wherein we had a lot of innovation. Banking is where the most amount of innovation happens. You can send money on phones. So we need to understand and again go back to the basics in terms of having a zero trust approach of segregating these environments. So one is where you want to have flexibility and at the same time you do not want any business impact, you need to have absolute segregation. You cannot have any communication between these two environments wherein you want a lot of flexibility. One of the initiatives that it's good you asked me this question, is kind of ensuring that we book the .dev domains for your enterprises and label everything that you test as .dev. This gives a very clear indications because you are being attacked every day, every hour. someone or the other is going to identify through your attack surface a vulnerability. So if you are able to label all your development servers as .dev and you publish or expose them into your testing environments or your customers, it becomes a lot more obvious that this ecosystem belongs to .dev. It is a development environment. Even if someone finds, it becomes like a bug bounty. It is not a production impact to you.
And the only other question I had was from much earlier in the presentation. Should we actually be looking at the other side of this problem? How do we actually stop these vulnerabilities in the open source software? Is actual big business explicitly funding open source development, at least in the key projects that they're dependent on, the real solution to some of these original problems?
So the way we are looking at choosing our third-party software supply providers, we also need to have a metric for choosing the open source projects or the suitability of these projects. OpenSSF has a ranking. I think there are certain other forums also which talk about ranking in terms of the number of contribution, the quality of the contribution, the vulnerabilities there, the active contributors, who all are using it. So with these metrics, in fact, incidentally, I was reading an article from Sonatype which which includes all of these aspects in terms of how do we shortlist an open source project for use into our ecosystems. At times, it also depends upon the contributors. Like we see a lot of contributors of Microsoft, Facebook, Google being as primary contributors or moderators in this group. So that helps, because today a lot of adversaries are masquerading as project moderators also. So we need to be very cautious of this aspect and devise a mechanism which includes your assessments too, to kind of use this as in your Bible of repositories, which everyone can use, all the developers can use.
Great. Thank you very much on behalf of the conference. Thank you. And we need to move quickly. We've only got another 3 minutes until we get to the next talk in this session, which is 5 ways to optimize your SOC.